Hello, all you ship facers. I'm Anthony from Oh Ship We Cruisin', and today I wanted to go over some of the different policies that have been updated from Carnival Cruise Line and how it affects you and our group cruise that's coming up. And if you didn't already know, we do in fact have a group cruise that's coming up in September of this year, 2021, and it'll be round trip out of Galveston, September 11th through 18th, and it's a Western Caribbean cruise. I know, right? Sounds like fun. If you do want more information or you'd like to book it, make sure you go ahead and reach out if you have any questions, because I'd be more than happy to help out with that. And basically, spots are going fast due to limited capacity aboard the ships right now. But as far as this goes with the policies and everything else that we're going to get into today, I just want to let you know I will also be covering the Alaska policies, as that is a US-based cruise, and basically these policies are all relating to those, with Alaska having its own special set because of how strict it is. But without any further ado, let's go ahead and get into those policy changes. So essentially what Carnival is calling this is their Have Fun, Be Safe COVID-19 guidelines. This will be serving as the framework as they return to sailing, so there's a smooth transition, and so that everybody who's going on to a ship knows exactly what to be expecting. The first thing is involving booking, which hasn't really changed a lot. It is still relying heavily on the CDC and what their decisions are. So for any updates or anything like that, you're just going to want to go to the CDC's website directly. The second thing is going to be enhanced health screenings. And I'm going to go ahead and read exactly what it says directly from the Carnival website to get the exact idea, and then I'll go into detail a little bit more of what it means for you. So the enhanced health screenings that they'll be having, it says every guest will undergo enhanced pre-embarkation health screenings. We will refer anyone with signs and symptoms of COVID-19 or who are identified at risk for additional medical screening before allowing them on board. Secondary screenings and health checks throughout the cruise will be performed when necessary. Contact tracing is planned for every single cruise. Protocols are evolving as changes are announced, and we'll share more information as possible. So let's unwrap that real quick. Essentially, if you're giving off signs while you're in the terminal that you might have COVID-19, like, sneezing, coughing, anything like that, have a fever, or, fail the COVID test that they're giving, if they do that randomly and you happen to be chosen and you fail that, then, from there, there'll be additional stuff. But essentially, whether you're vaccinated or not, this still applies. So if you have any symptoms like that, even if it's just allergies, they may actually put you in for additional screening. It's nothing necessarily to worry about unless you test positive for COVID, obviously, which is where having trip insurance and cruise insurance and such comes into play really nicely. And I highly recommend it for anyone who's doing a cruise like this, because in situations like that, they will reimburse and cover medical costs. As to the extent of that, it differs from policy to policy. Carnival does in fact offer a possibility for that through their own website too. So if you do want more information, you can definitely find that directly on Carnival's website. Contact tracing is planned for every cruise. What does that mean? So essentially, whether it be via their app, or they may actually have some sort of wearable stuff like a watch or something for each one of the guests on board, essentially to track if someone does end up testing positive for COVID throughout the cruise, they would then be able to directly see who they've come into contact with and be able to appropriately notify anyone for that and handle it in that regard. Now, hopefully it doesn't come to that, but better safe than sorry, and it's a pretty good way for that to happen. There are also additional benefits for that, which is the possibility of them being able to deliver drinks to wherever you are by just being able to track that bracelet or the app. Cruise lines have already actually put into effect on their cruises. MSC Cruise Lines is one of them. I know Royal Caribbean has been doing it, and there's a couple others that are considering doing something similar. They had already planned on doing something similar before COVID even happened. It just happens to be the contact tracing is an additional benefit of it, essentially. So the next thing is going to be responsible physical distancing. Now, everyone's kind of gotten used to something like this anyway, so it's not really going to be a huge change or update for cruise ships. I mean, it just makes sense logically. So essentially what it means is physical distancing will be maintained throughout check-in and embarkation and be required in terminals, onboard ships, on private islands, and during shore excursions. This will be managed by adjusting the flow of groups through reduced occupancy, staggered activity times, and closely managed group sizes. Entertainment programs and restaurants will be designed to enhance physical distancing. Now, unpacking that, what does that mean? So essentially, the normal stuff, the easier, more obvious one is during embarkation, getting on to the ship, or even going off to any sort of excursions. They will be practicing distancing in line, basically spacing you out to make sure that you're not as close to each other as if it was a normal packed-in cruise. And if you've been on a cruise, you know they pack you in like sardines normally. Thankfully, that is one thing I'm happy is not going to be the case right now. Now, the parts that are definitely interesting are on the private islands and even shore excursions and such. They will be doing the distancing protocols as well. Now, what this means is essentially each of the groups for the excursions, there's going to be more small groups of excursions instead of having smaller numbers of big groups for excursions, if that makes sense. So they'll have more guides and things like that, but having the amount of people in each group limited. This is partially the importance of going through Carnival officially for an excursion, because they're able to practice that safely and they have really good protocols in place, and I highly recommend it in this particular scenario. As far as the reduced occupancy, activity times, and stuff like that for restaurants and for the entertainment, now essentially from what I understand and what they've released, and we'll see, this is subject to change, any of this information is subject to change, but essentially they'll have more times for activities. They'll have same activities several times a day instead of having like once or twice rather. And for the dining times, they'll have basically more dining times, but have things spaced out so that you're not just, on top of each other while you're eating, because they want to practice social distancing. So they'll have like every other seat or table that is spaced out and not being used. Essentially all these things going into making sure that it's as distanced as possible. The next one would be masks. So face masks for all forms of transportation are still required by the CDC. However, protocols are evolving and changes will be announced as that happens. They'll share more information once they have it, but essentially, during transportation or in close proximity where social distancing cannot be maintained, they're requiring masks as to the CDC's orders, since this is going to not be a vaccine required cruise. So it's pretty self-explanatory. Basically, if you can't keep away from somebody, you gotta wear a mask. While you're eating or drinking, of course, that's a different story. And if you're outside on the cruise ship and you're adequately away from other passengers, from what they've said so far, you will not have to wear a mask during those times. So basically, if you're in the spa, pools, or anything like that too, you are not required to wear a mask at the time of being in that. So the next thing, personal hygiene. Seems pretty self-explanatory. Essentially, they're going to have hand washing sinks and sanitizing stations throughout the ship, which, those will be required to use before going into an area, which makes total sense. Just got to practice good hygiene. It's a good thing on a normal day. Even before COVID, it was a good thing to do. Some of the biggest differences that'll be coming from that are that basically there's no more buffets kind of thing. I mean, it's still there, but essentially the staff is going to be serving you. So there's no self-service of any of the food or drinks or anything like that. You will have to rely on the actual crew to give you said food and drink. So you'll go with your plate and they'll go ahead and put stuff on it, and then at the end of it, hand it to you with whatever you've asked to put on. Pretty simple, kind of nice, kind of like just, being catered to. It's not as quick, sure, as just running to the buffet in the past and such and just grabbing a piece of, pizza directly yourself or something like that, but it's a lot safer, and I'm personally okay with it. So the next thing that we should talk about here are the shore excursions. Now, this is one of the ones that's having a pretty big difference, and I'll get into why here in a second. I'm going to go ahead and read off what they've put out officially, and then go into exactly what this means and how it's very different. So safe shoreside experiences. We're working with local authorities, destination, and tour operators so that enhanced health and safety measures on board are maintained ashore. We will follow health protocols for every port we visit. There may be a reduction in the capacity of excursions and tour vehicles. Only shore excursions that comply with our prescribed protocols are permitted, with strict adherence required of all guests and denial of reboarding for any guests who do not comply. Now that's a big deal. What does this mean for you though? Essentially, and they're saying everything but this, and they're not exactly saying it, but it's pretty much alluding to it, is that if it's not a shore excursion that's officially through Carnival, there's no guarantee that you will be allowed back on board, because if it's not something they approve of, if they don't follow the strict adherence to CDC protocols and health and safety, essentially Carnival will deny you reboarding. Now this is a big problem because that means you have to try to find your way back to the United States on your own with all your stuff still on board, with the exception of whatever you took off the ship with you. Now this is a big deal because no one wants to be in that situation. You're paying a bunch of money for a cruise. You want to actually be able to go on the cruise. And more importantly, you want to keep everyone safe. I mean, not only just yourself, but everyone around you. So essentially, it's very important in this situation to strictly go through Carnival for booking excursions, even though in the past I've definitely been someone who's a huge advocate for, if you see another excursion outside of it that's reputable, to go for it. Right now is not the time for that. Right now, you're going to follow the rules. If you want to basically go for any excursions, do it officially through Carnival, because that's the only way to guarantee you will be able to get back on the ship. You do not want the ship to leave you, and trust me, they will leave you. Okay? So book your excursions through Carnival, and remember that they're going to be having smaller groups for each of the excursions, and some excursions may even just have limited bookings in general. So definitely work on getting those booked fast if you know when you're doing your cruise. All right, so that covers all the general rules and guidelines that they've added in. And there's one more section that I want to get into. Now this one strictly pertains to Alaska cruises. Now this one's a lot more, I'd say a lot more restrictive, because unlike the other cruises in the United States, which do not require a vaccine for you to be on board, the Alaska cruise is 100% vaccination. So every single person who gets on the ship has to be vaccinated. And of course, the crew and passengers are included in that list. Whereas every other cruise from the United States with Carnival, only the crew is being 100% vaccinated. Now, this does create some turmoil for some folks, because it basically means that if you are under the age that you can get the vaccine, or you're someone who has health exemptions where you can't get it, then you're just not going to be sailing. Plain and simple. I'll go ahead and read this down and then get into it a little bit more, but that's essentially what this means. So these are the protocols for Alaska Summer 2021 sailings. Alaska cruises are available only for guests who have received their final dose of an approved COVID-19 vaccine at least 14 days prior to the beginning of their cruise and have proof of vaccination. So you will need to have that vaccination card as proof. Accordingly, the following only applies to specific Alaska itineraries. All guests, including children who are age eligible for vaccines, will need to prove their vaccination. So they'll need to show that proof of vaccination with their card. This means that, regrettably, guests who are not vaccinated, including children who are not yet eligible for the vaccine, will not be permitted to sail. So that's a big deal. Unless you're somebody who likes to cruise without kids anyway, then it might be heaven for you. Our Have Fun, Be Safe guidelines for Alaska voyages incorporate guidance from the CDC and Alaska officials. So that's why it's so strict, because Alaska and CDC have been working together to allow for this return to sailing in Alaska. All guests will be asked to confirm their status as fully vaccinated for COVID-19 during check-in and provide proof of vaccination in advance of boarding. As a reminder, fully vaccinated means the final dose of the vaccine was administered 14 days prior to embarkation. It's important for guests to come prepared, as those who arrive at the embarkation terminal without the proper proof of vaccination will not be able to cruise, and no refund will be issued. That's a big deal. Basically, bring your stuff proper, or you will just be out of luck and out the money. There will be no refund because you were warned ahead of time. You know exactly what the policy is, And if you choose to ignore that, whether it be due to forgetfulness or you just blatantly ignore it, there is no chance of you getting that money back. You are just out of luck. And quite honestly, I don't blame them for that. Because if you're not prepared, that's not on them, that's on you. So it's important to be prepared so you don't put yourself in that situation. So essentially, masks are still required for transportation and stuff as per the CDC guidelines, but it is subject to change. While guests will be vaccinated, we will follow protocols and requirements for each destination while ashore in Alaska. Remember, these restrictions are under control of local government and are subject to change without advance notice. So we encourage all guests to come prepared for potential mask requirements ashore. So basically, even if the country itself does not have a mask requirement, local government has the right to dictate that a mask is required or not. And even further down below that, a business has the right to require a mask. So always bring one just in case, because again, all these different things are subject to change, but also they can enforce it. So it's just, a good idea to carry a couple masks, whether it be some disposable ones or reusable ones. Just always have that with you, because in transit you'll need it anyway, and you might need it in other places too. Alright guys, so that's all the new policy updates from Carnival for any of the cruises that are coming out of the United States. If you have any additional questions, definitely drop them down in the comment section or shoot me a message. If there's anything additional you'd like me to cover, just go ahead and let me know. Otherwise, I'll be posting updates as they come out. If there's anything that changes with our group cruise that's coming up, I will make sure to update everyone immediately for that as well. But in the meantime, if you like the content you've seen today, I definitely invite you to subscribe and like this video. It definitely helps out with the YouTube algorithm. So until next time, let's get ship-faced.